Hey everyone, I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am just dropping this special little clip into all the episodes. So, no matter what episode you're listening to, this is actually pretty current as of July 2024. I wanted to come on here and just say a big thank you to Earworthy because the Life Shift podcast was just named the best overall podcast of the year in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. And you've probably seen some articles written about the Life Shift podcast before, written by Earworthy. And now he is launching from his online publication, he is launching these yearly winners of independent podcast awards. And these are specifically for indie podcasters. We are those that wear all the hats. We create the show. Some people write the show. We're producers, sound engineers. We troubleshoot all the tech. We do any kind of research if we need to. We host the shows. We distribute the shows. We do all the things that relate to our shows because we love it. And it's so nice to see my name in a list with some other amazing podcasts like Multispective, which won Best Life Lessons Podcast. Salad with a Side of Fries won Best Health Podcast. Bippity Boppity Business won Best Business Advice Podcast. And there are so many more. And so I just want to come on here and say thank you to Earworthy for not only doing these awards every year and just honoring some of us indie podcasters that sometimes feel like we're just shouting into the void, but we're not. We're just doing what brings us joy, and hopefully through that work it brings other people joy. In my case, for the Life Shift, I hope that each episode finds the ears that needed to hear it the most so that they feel a little less alone in their circumstance. But also, Earworthy writes all these amazing publications pretty much weekly, every week, every weekday, I should say, where he writes on Blogger, Medium, Substack, Tumblr, Vocal, Many Stories, and for other places. And he really just highlights the independent podcasters. So thank you, Frank, for everything you do with Earworthy and for recognizing all of us in the first Earworthy Independent Podcast Awards. If you'd like to read more, please head to medium.com/EAR hyphen WORTHY. Thanks again and enjoy this episode.
I think once my little brother came along, it was easier to let some of that go and really try and connect and cultivate that relationship and try and be as like present and intentional with my younger brother as it could be, because I just wanted to be this ideal older brother.
I'm joined by Daniel Rinaldi in this episode of the Life Shift podcast. He's a mental health counselor, and in this episode, he shares the story of losing his older brother to an inoperable brain tumor when his brother was only 10 years old. Daniel paints a picture of his happy and tight-knit family, but then also the sudden and devastating impact of his brother's passing and how it affected his life. He talks about how for a long time his identity was tied to being the kid with the brother who died. I can relate to this in the sense of my own story and being the kid whose mother had died. But he talks about how that identity protected him from dealing with his grief. As he got older, he realized that he needed to confront his grief head on. And he also shares how he's used his experience to live a life that he thinks would have made his brother proud. So I hope you enjoy this heartfelt conversation about grief, identity, and finding meaning in what we do. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to give a big thank you to Mickey and Tracy and Emily for being all around amazing humans, but also for sponsoring 2 episodes of the show each month. With the Patreon, it allows me to try new software, upgrade hardware, and continue bringing these important stories to the public. So thank you. If you'd like to check out the options that I have on the Patreon feed and help support the show, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com/join. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm happy to share this new episode of the Life Shift podcast with my guest, Daniel Rinaldi. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. And I am here with Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining me. I look forward to hearing your story because I think there are going to be a lot of areas, or I imagine that there will be a lot of areas that I can relate to. You're a mental health counselor, so I think there's going to be some interesting conversation to be had because I am not. However, I do feel that in my journey, I call myself sometimes an expert in grief because I've experienced it in so many different ways, and I found a way to grieve that works for me. So your story is, is going to have those elements, and I'm really interested in having this conversation. So I appreciate you, just one, being willing to come on and be vulnerable and share your actual story.
Absolutely.
Typically, I like to have the guest come on and paint like a picture of what life was like before. That way we can understand how significant that shift was in your life. So maybe you could just paint a picture of kind of what life was like leading up to this moment.
I grew up in New York City, working middle class family, very tight knit Italian family, every Sunday over at grandma's type of family. Went on vacations, did everything together, just close knit. Came from a very close knit town. You went to the same schools as your parents went to, you played on the same sports teams or did the same extracurriculars that every other kid did or your parents did when they were younger. So it was a very happy, wonderful kind of upbringing and growing up.
Like a traditional family kind of feel.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I consider myself extremely lucky the way I grew up and being able to experience like aunts, uncles, cousins, where now it's not so much like that. You kind of grow apart as you get older, but I got to, you were always with your cousins, you were always with your family, and it was just that kind of love and connection that really made you just feel loved and connected. I would, I think it's the best way to explain it. That was kind of what my life was like and what my upbringing was like. And I lived with my mom and my dad and my older brother. We lived in a 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment in Flushing, Queens. It was, I wouldn't have it any other way either. Like I used to think it was so cool that I got to ride an elevator up to the fourth floor every day, and one of the best things now living in New England is I didn't have to shovel snow then. So that was also a plus growing up. But yeah, so I lived with my parents, my older brother.
How much older was he?
He was 4 years older than me.
And it was just the two of you and then your parents.
So that it was two of us and my parents, and then my younger brother came way later. My younger brother Nicholas is actually 10 years younger than me. So there's quite an age gap, and usually that's like always a good conversation starter. When anyone asks, they're like, "Wow, you guys are 10 years apart. That's interesting." Like, usually you get the, "Oh, was." My parents, I remember my mom always getting, "Oh, was he an oops baby?" Like what happened? And they were like, "No, he was very much like planned and wanted." And the unit that I'm talking about, my mom, my dad, myself, and my older brother, my younger brother, unfortunately wasn't a part of that unit. So I was 7 years old. My older brother was 10. We were like any other brother, duo. And one day he wasn't feeling well. Wasn't feeling well. Take him to the doctor. And I'll remember this forever. They talked about it. Oh, I think he might have mono. I think he might have mono. That was like the thing. And ever since then, as I grew older, anytime a doctor ever said the word mono, I was like, ugh, like my body just felt like it was going to fall apart. So shortly after they did that, it just didn't make sense. Didn't go along with what they were thinking. It ended up that my brother had an inoperable brain tumor on the stem of his brain stem glioma is the term of it, and it wasn't long after that my older brother at the age of 10 passed away. I was 7 at the time, and life as we knew it got flipped upside down. I mean, even just the experience of him being sick, obviously that was like I mean, it tore everyone in the family down, from the immediate family unit to cousins to people in our town, right? Like it was the first kid that like that was that sick, and was, did not have a there was no positive outlook there. So yeah, so that was like the life shift moment. There was my older brother passing away.
And you were 7 when all this occurred?
Hmm.
Now, at 7, looking back, do you think that you had an awareness of the finality of death, or, like, what that was like?
Absolutely not. I had no idea, right? All of a sudden, like for me, I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just gonna like, oh, a week later, 2 weeks later, this is all gonna be back to normal, right? Like this isn't final. This isn't my brother's not gone. I couldn't understand that. And then another part to that that makes it difficult is that everyone wants to make you happy because you are the 7-year-old kid that is there, and everyone's nice to you. Everyone's doing things for you. All of a sudden, you're like you have the greatest friends, you have the greatest family. My parent, you're where can we go out to eat? Where can we go? Let's go on a vacation. Like let's do this, let's do that. Do you want you want to play this sport? You want to join karate? You want to do all these things? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. So it very much so, besides being 7 and not, you know, cognitively not really getting the concept of that, because my concept of that was the older people in my family pass away, and they're way old. They're in their 80s, 90s, and that's what happens. The concept of death to me wasn't that a 10-year-old could something like this could happen. Yeah, I didn't fully get it. I was like, wow, this is so great. All of our family is together all the time. People are bringing food. Like, what is this? Like, it felt like a party. Like there was just so many people that wanted to make you happy that it was tough to really wrap your head around it at 7. And it took me a very, very long time to really come to terms with it. I don't even know if I'm completely to terms with it. Even, this happened when I was 7. I'm 35 years old now. So like it's been a long, long time, and I don't know if I'm still can ever really fully put my hands on it.
I can relate to this in so much, and other listeners of the show have heard my story, and my mom died in an accident when I was 8, and I can relate to this sense of everyone is doing everything they can to mask the sadness for me. When now, and I'm early 40s now I know that what I really needed at the time was the tools to help me grieve and to help me process and all those things. And so now at 35, do you look back at those moments in a different light? Because I guess at a 7-year-old, you're like, oh, cool, like food and people are all together and people are taking me and I can do whatever I want. It's like this like vacation for this period of time of from reality of what that real world is. Do you look back now on that with different feelings because you kind of see what they were doing?
I don't know if I look back at it with like a different feeling of like I get it now, obviously, right? Like I can look at it and go, oh, okay, I understand that. And part of me is thankful for it. Part of me is thankful for the time my parents put in to make sure that I was okay. I always am amazed by my parents, especially during that time. They had another young kid at home. Their other child just passed away. Very easily, they could have went many different ways, right? They could have split, because they couldn't handle it. They could have fallen into deep dark holes, and maybe they did, right? I never knew. I didn't know. They were very good at, you know, just being there for me because they knew they had to be. So they decided to pour themselves into me. And so I look back at those moments, and I can understand where everyone was at and what they were trying to do, especially in my career path now. I get it. But also, too, like, my parents definitely did, like, they put me in bereavement classes, like kids' bereavement, because they were doing their own, right? Like, I don't necessarily think like individual therapy was like a thing that people talked about and did back in like the early 90s. Like, I don't remember it, but like these bereavement groups were a thing, and it helped me kind of sort of get it, but like also like feel like I was like, okay, I can go and like do school and go back and do all these things, because like I think bereavement allowed me to put a band-aid on it for a while. And I think that probably maybe the same thing with my parents, right? Like they found connection, they found people that were similar to them, which is important. I'm sure at that time they felt completely alone, because we no one ever knew anyone who had a kid that passed away.
And then you also just don't have the tools to help your own child. And so that's, I feel like almost that adds another layer of grief, right? Because you're grieving the loss of one child, but now you're also trying to figure out how to navigate this world to help this helpless, if you will, 7-year-old here that entire life has been changed completely and it will never be the same. Do you remember at that time like noticing any like the biggest change? Like was there anything about you that changed a lot after that moment?
Not necessarily right after that moment. I think lots of changes came later on that I didn't realize were part of that journey. There were periods of time where I was, an angry kid. There were periods of time where I didn't want to listen to anyone. There were periods of time where I mean, I'm still an anxious mess, but like,
Aren't we all?
yeah, yeah, I mean, but I don't necessarily remember there being like immediate changes to things right away.
Like no rebelling or anything like that? Like
Much later, much later.
probably because you were protected as well, you know?
Yeah, and the thing about it too is like even like where I could have rebelled in school, right? I was getting that as well because my brother was in that school. So every teacher and every kid did the same thing, right? Like, oh, Daniel, how are you? What do you need? What can we do? It wasn't until like later on, maybe like seventh and eighth grade, where I really started to maybe become a handful for some of my teachers. No one knew that that was, me searching, me trying to find connection or fill a void or whatever it might have been at that time. So the changes, like right away, I was always cushioned. Anywhere I went, I was cushioned.
I'm interested because I wonder, did any of that become your identity for a while as like you were now Daniel with the brother who died? Like that was your new.
Absolutely. I definitely think that there were parts of my life where that was my identity. Of, you grew up in these tight knit communities and these places. The baseball field was named after my brother, right? So, things of that nature. There was a memorial plaque on our church, right? Like at the time, like that was like, it was like, oh, that's Daniel, that's Danny's brother, and then people would ask, and or anything that I did leaned into. I went to a Catholic school when I was younger, so like anything I did was like, oh, I'm gonna write about Saint Michael, which was my brother's. I'm gonna be Saint Michael. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna have this, and all of these things. So I think, yeah, I definitely think for a while, like being Daniel, the kid whose brother passed away, was a definite identity for me.
I asked that because for so long, part of my grief process, I cheated myself. I think in the long term, I cheated myself because I used when I got old enough to understand it, but I used the fact that my mom had died as kind of this excuse or a benefit in a weird way of saying, like, look, this went bad in my life because my mom died. This was afforded to me. This experience was afforded to me because my mom died. And it was just like this very much that was my identity. I was the kid with the dead mom. And, and it took me forever to like shed that. And then here I am on this podcast now. And it's like the reason, because I didn't realize for so long that I used that identity to protect myself, right? Like I didn't know how to process it. And so if I used that, it was always the external excuse of anything. And I wasn't able to like really form myself. And so you can probably relate to this from the mental health counselor perspective. But I was very much running my life until like 30 something as that 8-year-old kid. Do you feel looking back that you did something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was definitely always like a protective thing. It was easy to, well, I did this because of this, or well, I'm doing this because of this, or this is who I am because of this, and using it as a protective factor in moments when, you know, was it that? I don't know. Maybe. I don't It could have been, but there were some times where I was just a pain because I was a pain, like, or I did things just because like that's what I wanted to do. But I definitely think like it was something that definitely protected me for a long time until now, like you said, like until now in my 30s, where like I finally started to work on it a little bit more and connect with it a little bit more and talk about it a little bit more, because there was a distinct part of my life where I never wanted to talk about it and I never wanted to use it as an excuse or a way to get ahead or a way to just, I didn't want to utilize it for anything. Where now, if someone can hear what I went through and maybe they went through something similar, and they can find some sort of part of themselves in my story and how I live my life now, that maybe they can feel like they can take that in their own life and say, okay, like I'm going to work on this. I'm going to talk about this.
How do you think it affected you in that time period before you got to where you are now? Like what do you think it stopped you from doing or pushed you to do? Maybe career-wise or just in general?
I think it always has. I don't know if it's ever stopped me from doing things. I've always been the type of person that kind of like, if I get a thought in my head, I will take the risk and go for it. Maybe not so much now as I've settled down, become a father, and like can't really, jump on the road with a band at 35 with a kid.
You could try.
Yeah, I could try. Yeah, it would take a lot. I think it's more made me search in my life, and I think anything that I've done in my life has been me searching to fill in the gaps that are no longer, that weren't there, or that were missing rather, whether it be joining a band and coming together with other individuals that felt like an older brother, and that felt real good, so it made it a real easy decision to jump and do that. And any yeah, so I think it's actually made me just always, and I say this all the time now, it made me curious as to what I could go out and do, and that anything could happen at any time, and I didn't want to, at that time in my life, I didn't want to waste any moment doing like the thing that everyone was doing. All of my friends went to the same high school and all this stuff. I went to a high school that was like they just built and just started being a high school. Like I dropped out of college to go tour with a band.
You went against the system.
Yeah, essentially, like I went against everything that was, anything that would have been safe. I could have done all of the safe things my friends did, went to the same high schools, went to the same colleges, got the same jobs, but I think I always wanted more, and I think there was always a part of me that wanted to, I don't know if I thought this back then, but it's something I think about now. It's like I wanted to live a life that could have also been for him, that he could have grabbed onto and had with me.
I was gonna ask if you've ever felt like you were living your life for your brother, but it sounds like maybe were you living your life more like I'm gonna do what I want to do because I know that's what my brother would want? Or did you find yourself gravitating towards topics or activities that your brother liked that maybe you didn't necessarily care about just because you knew he wasn't gonna be able to do that?
I think for me, I always wanted to do things and live a life that I thought, and I don't know, I think made up what he would have thought, but at that time, but like things that would have made him proud of me and would have made him go, "Wow, man, I can't believe like you're doing that," or "I can't believe that this," I mean, there's only been one song I've ever wrote about my brother, and it was released on a CD. And one of the lines is, "It am I making you proud?" And I think that's always been part of the journey when I've wanted to do things was like I want to make him proud. If he was here, if he was here physically in front of me, I would want him to like be so proud of this. And that's been a blessing, but also a curse, right? Because he's not there. And then when I do these things, I'm like, oh man, like, wouldn't that be wonderful if I wonder what he would have said. I wonder if he would have liked the music I made, or would he have hated it, or would he have been the first person in line. Yeah, I think a lot of the things I've done have been more to feel like I was making him proud and feel like I was living a life for him.
Do you remember him or do you remember the idea of him? And this comes from a personal question on my own, just of my mom.
So I have very clear memories of us together. Some of them are, some of the later ones are burned into my brain. And like I always it kind of is like a funnier thing now, but it's actually in my head when I think about it. I'm like, this is really sad. Like I can literally tell you every inch of the hospital floor and where everything was and what specific things were where. I remember who was in the room, who I saw first, all of these things. So I remember as I've gotten older, some things are a lot harder to sit back and remember. Yeah, there's times when I can remember, and then there's times where it's hard. Like I need to really like search for it, as I've gotten older.
Yeah, I've realized the same thing for myself in that at my mom I mean, I was 8 and I I can remember, the funeral and things like that. It was a sudden accident but at this point in my life, she is more of uh, like a figure. Like I knew I had one and I knew she existed, but I don't remember her. And so it's always interesting to look back at my grief journey and how attached I was to something that I didn't actually remember, and it was more of the idea of it and the things that I missed out on. Do you find yourself, I know you say you've done a lot of things to kind of make your brother proud. Do you find yourself missing those things, or have you been able to find, like missing the fact that you didn't grow up with your brother and missing that piece when you see other people with their brothers or whatever that may be?
I think there's always a sense of that. Having my younger brother, come into my life was definitely a really really big thing. And we're 10 years apart, but we're super close. Like it's not like we're that far away in our lives where we're not like, when I see my brother, like I want to be around my brother, like and we have a ton in common and things like that. For short periods of time, yes, there were moments, and I would probably before my younger brother was born, where there was like jealousy, and there were things where I was like, ah, man, like, and there's parts of me now, like especially having a daughter, like where I'm like, oh, I wonder what that relationship would have been like. I wonder if he would have had kids. Like, I wonder if he would have been married. I wonder all of these things. And like, there's certain parts of me where like there's some days where that angers me to no end. And then there's certain parts of me where like I'm like, you can't think like that. You have to think of it this way, and you have to reframe it this way, and all of these things. But there's always been parts of me where, especially kind of in the midpoint of my life, where you see a family with this wonderful happy family with like, and I'd see two brothers and I'd be like, oh cool, that's awesome, good for you, man. And that's not fair to those people, but in my own head, I would be like, oh yeah, wonderful, I'm so happy for you. Yeah, I think once my little brother came along, it was easier to let some of that go and really try and connect and cultivate that relationship, and try and be as like present and intentional with my younger brother as it could be, because I just wanted to be this ideal older brother. And that, I'm sure that has a lot to do with not having my older brother, but like, and I wanted to be all of the things I wanted him to be for me, if that would have happened. But yeah, so I think there's so many, when there's, and I'm sure you can relate, there's just so many moving pieces once you start that grief journey, once you start all of those things, where it all just like there's so many winding roads.
I'll tell you, my grief journey really like my eyes opened up when my therapist was like, you've been making all of your decisions as an 8-year-old for your since then. And I was like, oh, you're right. And it was like, that's such a simple idea, but until you are in this process and finding, your way through how you process grief and how you process a loss like that, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. But which makes me wonder how you got into mental health counseling and whether or not that's attached to that experience.
Yeah, there's definite attachment there. The main reason I got into mental health counseling was I was working in a school that was not very good at mental health, and I was around people in the mental health field at that time and was going like, "Ah, man, I really feel like I could excel at this, because I really I like connecting with people. I like trying to help people. What could I do? I wasn't happy with where I was." And then once I started really trying to like break down like, okay, is this am I going to leave this behind and go this route here? It really did come down to like, I've searched for connection and ways to like fill the holes that I have in me my whole life. And if I could go and help people do that by being someone who could be there with them, listen to them, validate them, let them know that hold a mirror up to them, and help them along their journey, then that was something that like was willing to like that was something that was important for me to just go and do it, and leave the prior stuff behind.
Like from music to this.
So music to working in like terrible schools to mental health counseling, but music is definitely directly responsible, like partly responsible for the mental health connection, because when I was in the band and the band ended, I fell into like a giant hole of like spiraling, like I'm not good enough. What do you like? It's that age old, like, what do you do when they stop screaming your name sort of story, and I had no idea what to do. And it was tough. And when I was like, okay, music maybe isn't in the cards anymore, what was I actually getting out of being the front man of that band? It had nothing to do with making money, because we didn't make any, right? It had nothing to do with seeing the country. I could do that on my own. It had everything to do with connecting with humans. And I was like, I'm okay with leaving this behind if I can still fulfill that connecting with humans and helping people, because that's what I felt I did in the band, was connect and help people turn off for an hour when they came to a concert, help people find themselves in our lyrics, and maybe it changed, maybe it helped them, maybe it said the things that they needed to say to somebody. So yeah, I think there was like a whole ball of stuff that really influenced a decision to go the mental health route.
Yeah, I would, and part of that was coming from. I mean, it makes sense now that you explain that. My original question was going to be, do you think your subconscious like pushed you in that direction to kind of help yourself in a way? Do you find that your career continually helps you with your grieving process? I know you said that you
Absolutely.
don't know if you're at the end, you don't know where you are in that journey, but I would imagine by helping others, you might help yourself.
Absolutely. I think any therapist who says they sit there as like this stale clinical like robot is a liar. And that might be a hot take, but that's just my opinion. Like there has to be some sort of emotion there, and there has to be some sort of honesty and connection with the person that you're sitting across from. Otherwise, you could talk to a wall, right? Or you can be replaced by an actual robot, which might happen one day. But there has to be some level of that. So yeah, I think all of that's led to this side of my career and wanting to like sit in front of people and getting out of the, whether it's a session or whether it's connecting with other professionals, whether it's, I've been lucky enough to connect with amazing, amazing professionals in the field. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I never went the route that I went. And that's helped me on my journey because I learned so much from them. But yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of times it is therapeutic to sit and talk and kind of throw up the curious, statement to somebody because you're like legitimately curious about it, because maybe you had that happen in your life and you're like, oh, I'm curious how you handled this situation, or I'm curious what you think about this situation. And subconsciously you're sitting there going like, huh, okay, okay, all right.
Do you think that that loss or losing your brother makes you a better mental health counselor?
That's an interesting question. I think perhaps, I think there's parts of that that allow me to have a deeper understanding of certain things, and have this like lived in experience. Even my time in the band, I always think is valuable to my mental health counseling. Just the lived experience that I've had, that, is part of the reason why I'm able to sit and people come back to the sessions, right? Like people come back because they find something in that therapist that feels comfortable and feels truthful and feels like they're sitting with someone who's a human and not just reading out of a book. So I do think life experience, and specifically my life experience, has definitely led to me being able to like understand myself enough to sit in a room and be able to like hold the mirror up and reflect that person to themselves, if that makes sense. I don't know if I made sense there, but I think I did.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Well, and I already had an answer to that question from you, but you said perhaps, which leads me to another question. But before I get there, I think that you're right. I think having that experience gives you the ability to have empathy in the sense of like when you were going through that and people were showering you with love and all these things, and maybe you hadn't grieved yet, you felt alone, even though everyone was around you, or I did. It was very much you're still alone. Like, am I the only person that has ever gone through this experience? And you just feel it. Logically, you probably know you aren't, but in that deep emotional part, you feel very alone. And so I think knowing what that feels like to help other people in those moments, I think it would make you a better counselor, a better therapist, a better just a listener because you know what's happening. But you said perhaps. Is there a reason why you why you think it might not help you?
I think that's like the former graduate student that is told like you have your personal stuff has no business being in the room. So I think there's part of it that always is this okay for me to feel this way in this room, or should I just be reading from this book of modalities and theories and I should never feel like a human in the room? So I think there's always a part of me that like never wants to lead a client somewhere because that's how I would have done it. I want them to get to that place on their own. So I never want to use like my own experience to maybe influence them in something that isn't for them. Like your grief journey is different, my grief journey is different, and it doesn't have to be just grief. It could be depression, it could be anxiety, whatever it might be. I want them to be able to choose their 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 space to be in, as opposed to, oh, I had that happen to me, this is how I did it, so now maybe I'm thinking a little bit differently in this session than I should be, where I should be more of a blank canvas, as opposed to someone who's like, oh yeah, this tool right here is really great, here you go, and you're kind of pushing it across the table, as opposed to like having the buffet there and going, you pick what you want, as opposed to me kind of like, what about this one, that one's really good, you should try this one. But it's their kind of their plate to make up when they're there. So I think that's where the perhaps comes in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a sense of awareness, right? So you're aware of this side, which is your experience, your lived
For
experience,
sure.
and then there's the awareness that there are like protocol that you could, like there is the clinical side of like this is what you can do, this might work. Here's all the different modalities, and having the awareness, I think, is good. I think perhaps is probably the best answer that you could give, and it was surprising to me because I was like, "Well, yeah, clearly my experience is going to help me be a better human because, like I've experienced something. Of course, I haven't experienced all of it, and even in the sense of losing someone, we were both around the same age. My after effect was much different than yours, right? Like I don't think I tried to live my life to what my mom would want. I lived my life to do what I thought everyone needed me to do to prove that I was okay so that no one else in my life would leave me. Because in my 8-year-old mind, my mom left, right? Like not on her own accord, but I was feared like if I do something wrong, my dad's going to be like, see ya, and I was going to be by myself.
Okay.
And so my life was, it's so interesting having these conversations with people that have lost someone very close to them at the same age and how we can move forward. And to your point, everyone's journey is different. We're all going to find our way through this life in a different way, but there's someone listening right now that will hear your story and and find some sense of not feeling as alone as they did, or knowing like look where you are after that experience. Sure, you had some rough patches. We all do, right? We're all human. We're all gonna have bad parts and good parts. I think it's interesting to hear other people's journeys and connect as humans. And I love that your journey has taken you to help other people. If you could look at this loss, is there anything, I don't know how to word this. Is there anything that you are grateful for the experience because of the loss or despite the loss? Do you think that you're different now and you're grateful for that because you had to go through this?
The quick answer is I don't wish it on anybody, and I wish that it never happened. Fast forward to, if it never happened, this is the craziest thing that I think about often, and I think my parents maybe have thought about it. If that doesn't happen, my little brother doesn't come along, and now he's 26 years old and there's 26 years of him and memories that don't happen. Maybe, right? I don't know if they were going to have another kid ever, again, or whatever that was. I think even though there was that loss, it's led me to certain points in my life that have been really important. And I think it's allowed my relationship with my parents to be a lot stronger and a lot different than most parent child relationships. I think it's allowed me to find strength in places that I didn't know I had it. It's allowed me to really lean into the curiosity of life and not wanting to waste it and not wanting to just sit and spin my wheels and be okay with what's right in front of me. I always going for it and sometimes to a fault, but I think despite the loss, like it's allowed for deeper connections with certain people and maybe a deeper connection with myself as I've gotten older, especially now where it took me 30 something years to like really reconnect. I think that's a lot when you're talking about, like, I call it long grief, right? So when you're talking a lot about a death that happened years and years and years and years ago, it's not the same as something that just happened, right? We're not necessarily going to open a closet and there's going to be clothes there still. We're not necessarily going to go into something and there's going to be a smell there that still lingers, right? So there's none of those things there anymore. So I think it took me a long time to connect in different ways, and I think the loss opened me up to being more curious and being more just able to be open to connect and open to say, like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to do it, or I don't know if this is the right thing, this sounds a little out of the box, but I'm going to do it. And yeah, I think there's certain things that have been in my life that have happened for the good. There's also been things that have happened for for worse because of it, but I think, as I've gotten older, I've found a certain amount of connection and peace and ways to kind of walk my own path in this journey here.
Yeah, isn't it hard to say? It's very I have sometimes I people are like, if you could go back in time, would you change it? And I'm like, well, surface level, yeah, of course, I wouldn't want someone to die. But as this version of me, I would not be this version of me had I not had that happen to me and had I not struggled for 20 years to grieve, had I not learned how to do it for me, that works well. I wouldn't have had the relationships that I have, that I had with my grandmother or, different people in my life. I would not be close with my dad, most likely. So there's a lot of things that it's weird to think about and also be like, yeah, but I like where I am now, but I wouldn't be where I am now if that hadn't happened, right? And it's so interesting. It's hard to say too. You were 7, so who knows, like, what you were and what you were going to be. I was 8. I do feel I was different, but who knows where I would have, been. But it is something that I think other people need to also understand that, unfortunately, situations like what happened to your brother and what happened to my mom and everyone else, they're part of this human experience, whether we want them to happen or not. And so when someone listens to your story and hears what you do with it or what you've done with it, or this curiosity that it's created, or this life that you're building in honor of your brother in some capacity, right? Of doing the curious things, someone else may be losing someone and going, yes, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But there is hope in the sense that, that you can find something.
If you're curious, you can find hope.
I don't know if I
Maybe.
was.
Not maybe not now, maybe not then, right? Like when I was 7, like I don't know what, I don't even know if I knew what it was to be curious. But now when when I feel like I'm losing hope in
Yes.
certain things, when I lean into, curious questions, or my curiosity into a subject, or my curiosity into a field, or my curiosity into other people, it leads me to talking to you, right? Talking to other people. It leads me into connecting with businesses, different things. And anytime I've ever lacked hope, I've always made it a point to go, oh, I wonder what's on the other side of this. I wonder what I could do with this, or how would this affect me? Just different things like that. And it allows for you to want to explore those questions, as opposed to just saying, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to crawl into this hole and that's where I'm going to be the rest of my life. It's very easy to do that. I tend to want to be uncomfortable and work from chaos. So I run headfirst into those questions and go, oh, I wonder what this is going to be like now.
That's so interesting. From my perspective, I ran away from those things for so long. And I don't know if it's the relationship of like a mother child or different than a brother to brother. I don't know what it was that caused that, but it really took me, it took me the 20 something years to grieve my mom. And then I was so close with my grandmother and she got cancer and I watched her die, but I felt like I did everything right in that. And as soon as I watched like that final breath, I sat with her the last 5 days of her life and didn't move. It was there. As soon as I watched that, then my life became more curious. And I don't know what that trigger was. And maybe it was just like, ugh, like we're all going to end up in this spot. Like maybe it's time now at 30 something years old to like lean into that. So, in part of me is like jealous that this is a weird thing to say, but jealous that you had that ability after your brother died to be curious, to try the things, to go through the motions, to see what's on the other side. Where I was like, I don't even want to know what's on the other side, like ever. Like I want this safe. I don't want anything else to happen to me. So, the journeys can be like sound similar on the surface, but be so very different.
Everyone's journey, not just with grief, but anytime, everyone's journey is so different, and it has all sorts of winding roads. And I owe a lot of that ability to do that to my parents. I was 18 years old asking them if I can go and tour the country in a van with a bunch of 25-year-olds. I had no idea who they were. And here's my mom, who needed to call me, and love her to pieces, right? But like, needed to call me every minute. Are you there? Are you okay? If I call my mom now, what's the matter? Like, it's very much like that. But I was able to do those things because they were willing to see that this is what I needed in this journey. My brain was taking me to these different things. And yeah, it definitely, I think I was creating my own therapeutic things before I even knew anything about a therapeutic relationship.
Well, I think they probably also wanted wanted to see you live your life and something that your brother was unable to do. And so I think
Yeah.
even though they were scared for you and we're going to call and check on you every 5 seconds, there was like he's got to go do it. Well, we can't keep him, locked down and go to school like everyone else. Let him do what he wants to do. I think that's something to be said. I think your parents definitely probably helped you create that curiosity or curate that curiosity, if you will, to tell you it was okay and that you can make mistakes and things, might not work out in your favor, but that's okay as well. If you could go back to those moments around the time that your brother passed away, is there anything that this version of you could say to him that would make a newer version of you any different?
That's a good question. I think this version of me would want to be able to hold his hand and tell him that it's going to be okay. As a 7-year old, I was bouncing off the walls. I couldn't connect the way I could connect now. And I wish that I would have been able to like put my arm around him, you know, be there. And I was there in my own way, right? I don't think my brother felt that I wasn't there, right? But I think, and that's something that I struggle with, is thinking back to like, did I tell him I loved him? Did he know I loved him? Did he know how important he was to me? Did he just think I was the annoying brother up until all this happened? You know, like I would have just wanted to be able to sit there and like everyone else, put a hand on him and be like, okay, all right. I think that's the version of me now would go back and do that.
Yeah. And you think back and it's like this version of you would not be this version of you had you not had that experience. And what we needed as kids, we can't go back and give ourselves. But I think we've learned and you've learned, and now you're able to take that experience along with the education and all the protocol to help other people in the space. And that part is the beautiful reward at the end, that that 7-year-old kind of had to suffer, but now what you're doing for these other people is a good reward, and probably your brother would probably be very proud.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now is where I can reach a hand out and say, like, I'm here for those people that I get the honor to sit with, you know, and to have them share their deepest stories. So I think, you know, the things that I wish I could go back and do, I feel like I'm currently doing.
I appreciate you wanting to just be a part of the Life Shift podcast and share your story. Just as you said when you started out, like if one person can hear this and feel a little less alone or feel connected to another human in the experience that they're going through, we win, right? That's the win. So thank you for being a part of this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
If you want to reach out to Daniel, we'll have some of his information in the show notes. And if you're enjoying these episodes, a rating and review would be great. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.